That's the thing. All right, listen, man. I appreciate you calling. It has been real. It has been awesome. And we appreciate your comments. We got another caller coming in. So
okay, man.
Thank you for calling in, bro. And you have a really good day. Keep Texas safe. You have some fun, man.
All right, man.
Later.
All right, we got another caller on the line here, I think. Hi, caller, you're live. What's your name?
My name is Bianchi. I'm calling from the Midwest. How you doing?
Pretty good, man.
Actually, I'm calling from St. Louis.
All right.
Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, but I agree. Now, I'm a non-believer. I don't believe in the Bible or Jesus or anything like that. But I believe very strongly in the United States Constitution, and especially the Second Amendment. And one thing, the Second Amendment is two parts. Not only does it talk about the militia, but it also talks about the right to bear arms. And you just had two court cases, one in 2000, recent in 2010, I think one maybe in 2008, where the judges said that the right to bear arms is separate than to the militia. And I hear people, when they quote the Second Amendment, they say, well, we're not back in those times where we're worried about England coming over and taking over. No, that's not what it really says. So, yeah, and this whole notion about I'm very strongly for those who show a mental ability not to own guns. They have some sort of problem. They should not have the ability to have guns. If you got a mental problem, if you have some sort of mental illness. But I don't see any restrictions that's needed on United States citizens owning guns if they can afford it.
Mm-hmm. And do you think? So you support gun ownership and you're against gun control, but do you think there's a problem with the government in general in the U.S. today?
Oh, absolutely. Government is totally out of control. The Constitution, 26 pages. The Constitution was designed to protect the citizens, protect the states and the citizens from the federal government. Mm-hmm. And anytime, wherever there is not a law, there's a right. But anytime you create a law, you're giving up rights. Exactly. And sooner or later, you will find yourself pushed up in a corner and surrounded with a lot of people with fangs in their mouth.
Well, exactly. I mean, to be fair, when a lot of people talk about the Constitution, they talk about two documents, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And he's right, the Bill of Rights, for the most part, is just a bunch of rights that are being given to you. And we consider them amendments to the Constitution. For those listeners who are not familiar, because we have some international listeners, what exactly is the Second Amendment, and what is he talking about here? I'm going to read it for you real quick. It's very short. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's it. It's a very simple, straightforward piece of text. And, it's your right. And when you pass laws, as I said in my article on the Sott page, Sott.net, if you haven't gone there, go ahead and read it. I say that, and commentators from that time, the American founding father commentators, British commentators like Blackstone, basically said that the passing of legislation about game and hunting was a way to usurp the people's ability to keep and bear arms, and this registration and all of these gun control things they basically make it absolutely, totally impracticable, the Second Amendment. So, so obviously...
You're absolutely right. Then when you have people saying, well, the government is not going to take your arm, not going to come into your house. But that's not true, because they do it in a very, very sneaky way. Exactly. And let me give you an example. When they come up with this notion of no guns around schools.
Yeah.
All right, now, suppose you got a house, a residence that's been there before the school was built, and they have guns. So you mean to tell me that you're going to take the guns from the people in that house that live across the school or on the other side of the block? Mm-hmm. That there's a sneaky way of the government coming in imposing that you got to remove your guns. They're taking your guns away from you.
Yeah, now, they declare these gun-free zones,
Absolutely. So that is just another example. And I'm for open carry also. And in this state, it is open carry. But when you do open carry, the police harass the hell out of you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What's your name? Your name's Bianchi, yeah?
Yes.
Do you think that a large number of the, a majority or a large number of people, like 1 million people in the U.S. carrying guns, do you think that is useful against government tyranny, basically? You think it would in some way help to prevent the government going too far, or maybe putting people in FEMA camps as they talk about and stuff like it? Do you think it's useful for that?
Well, yes, I do think it's useful for that. Matter of fact, there's a town in Georgia right north of Atlanta called Kennesaw, and it's mandatory that each household have a gun in Kennesaw, Georgia, and today.
Yeah.
And you can look around the world, for instance, like Switzerland. Switzerland doesn't have a standing army. Every person in Switzerland has a gun, and they're required to have ammunition and know how to use that gun. So, yes, is going to approach.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your comments, Pianki.
Thank you for having this conversation. I think it's well needed.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, we're getting a few. We're getting some callers there on this topic, and at this point, anyway, everybody is supportive.
No,
apart from the first guy.
Yeah.
Most people are supportive of the idea of carrying guns, and really, like, our main point, or the conclusion that we came to when we looked at this issue is that it really is a non-issue. It's being fabricated out of nothing.
The gun control debate is based on the faulty premise. As I mentioned in the introduction to the show, it only ever comes up whenever we've got these mass shootings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we looked last week at some of these mass shootings, and they stand out from the regular background kind of gun violence in a big way.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of things in common.
Well, absolutely. You got to look at it from the point of view of, like we mentioned last week, there was something like, but in the last 16 years or something like, there's been something along the lines of 65 shootings in schools, and maybe 6 or 7 of those, if you charted them on a graph in terms of number of people shot, there would be 6 or 7 of them that stand way out.
Yeah.
Compared to the normal, which is 1 or 2 people shot, there's 6 or 7 that jump way up to 22, 30 people shot and stuff. And it's those shootings that ignite this gun control debate.
Yeah.
And overall in the U.S., on average, I don't know, the figure somewhere between 10, 11, 12,000 homicides. People being killed, a homicide, every year in the U.S. And obviously these mass shootings contribute a tiny number to that number of people. So it's
represented as being like the whole. When people say
exactly.
When people say school shooting, they leave it up to you to imagine that it was 20 people each time, but actually it wasn't. So.
No, exactly. Yeah, and it's so. What about the other 10? If it's 12,000 every year, what about the other 11,950? Do people not mind that number of people have been shot one at a time every year in the U.S.? They only care about the 50 people last year, for example, 50-some people who were killed in a mass shooting. Is that the only time it becomes an issue? I mean, obviously we're talking here about some other problem in terms of maybe a culture of violence, or why so many people are killed, not just shot with guns, but are killed in any way. Why is there so much violence in the U.S. compared to other countries? And is that even true? I mean, the U.S. is held up around the world as an example of a culture of violence and a gun culture that has become a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are shootings in other countries, but the U.S. always seems to stand out and is held up as a problem. So that's something maybe we should discuss a little bit, is the idea of is there a culture of violence in the U.S.? Is the U.S. society a violent society? Is it?
And why? The most important thing that I think is it's apparent. It's apparent that it is a culture of violence. I'll move closer. It's apparent that it is a culture of violence in the U.S. I mean, that was the argument that I made in the article. I think I gave sufficient evidence. I mean, there's plenty of evidence, that violence is ubiquitous, an American creative expression, which is like a sign of saying, hey, why are people so identified with violence? Why do they want to produce violent images, and why do they want to consume them? And it can't really be explained as, oh, that's just pushed on them by the government or propaganda, because it's not entirely. They do that, of course. Yes, they do. But why do people accept it so readily? Because people really delight in violence. And so there is a culture of violence in America, and we're reaping the benefits now of the violent seeds that have been sown over the last, since the early 1900s, since the Industrial Revolution, where people were turned into economic units for production and marginalized by society. The creation of basically people to work on the assembly line, and most importantly, the fact that all those people, that was promoted for them to breed as much as possible. They wanted to create more workers to work in the factories. And now they're replacing them with machines. So you have massive people being laid off, no longer having jobs, no longer being able to feed themselves. And of course, you're reaping the collective, and like kind of a collective unconscious. I don't know if I really want to say that exactly, but I want to say it's kind of like the only way to express it is that there is a genetic hatred in people from the oppression of their forefathers, that manifests in them. I mean, that's the only way I can really kind of explain it. I'm not sure that I'm saying that that's exactly scientifically what I'm saying is happening. I'm saying that it appears that people remember, and you see that kind of stuff happening in like Jewish populations as well. They do seem to have this memory of the violence done to them by the German people. And like there was a documentary done where they took a bunch of Jewish school children to do a tour of the campsites and the various concentration campsites. And you could see in these kids, there was young kids' faces, that there was a level of emotion that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I mean, they really felt it in a way that was surprising, in my opinion. The emotion, the depth of the emotion that they felt for it, and so you can see in the behavior of Israel sometimes you can almost kind of understand it. They do have a very, and a lot of bad things were done to them. I mean, you can't escape it. I mean, there's people who go around talking about Holocaust this and Holocaust that and stuff like that. But I mean, the Jewish people suffered a lot, yeah. and that comes through in some kind of genetic or collective subconscious of the people, and it makes them want to never again type of thing.
Yeah,
and it's the same. You have to see that it transfers to the U.S. because the way that you abuse people creates in them a desire for justice, and when they can't get it, it just starts to boil over in
other ways. Yeah.
In other ways, and for a lot of people who are intrinsically good-souled people, it doesn't manifest in real violent violence. It's just anger, maybe road rage or something like that comes out every once in a while, or maybe they get in fist fights, or they do some other kind of like violent activity, or they start doing violent video games. Or they start creating violent images, which then it's like them passing on the violence from a previous generation into the next, which then consumes it, and it's almost like a family feud type of thing where they're trying to get reprisals for things that have happened not only to them in their life, which happens in everyone's life, but the lives of the previous people. They see their father being working in the factory every single day. He comes home, he's just completely slaughtered from work, and he just drinks himself into a stupor, and maybe he's a little bit abusive or something like that, and they look at that situation like, why is he like this? And they start to hate society because they start to blame him for their situation, and society is in a certain sense to blame for it, obviously, and that creates in them anger. They're angry. People are angry. It is a culture of violence. That's basically what I'm saying. That's all I have to say, really.
Yeah, but that. The expression of that anger as a result of social injustice, let's say.
Yeah.
It seems that the government is, I don't know if they're directly aware of it and consciously take action to deal with it and to keep it under wraps. But it seems to me that